pound for pound, Rohit is probably like the best grappler in India, in my opinion. Like he's definitely up there. And then I remember realizing like, wow, like at that moment, I was like, wow, my words have consequences. That guy talks a lot of shit. I'm not the biggest fan of him. He basically beat me once by like humping my back for like 2-3 minutes.
This video is brought to you by the LockerRoom mobile app.
So welcome back everyone to the LockerRoom India YouTube channel, and welcome to the first episode of On the Mat series. And today with us we have Sanjay Nambiar, who is a grappler who has been competing all across India. So Sanjay, first of all, welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. Especially, did you say this was the first episode?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. It's a huge honor. It's a huge privilege. LockerRoom is like huge in India. One of the best platforms for Indian MMA, Indian news. So it's a huge honor for me to be on this platform. Thank you so much for everything you do for Indian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA.
So Sanjay, you have been competing all across India. For the people that who are not aware of you, like, could you just give us a small introduction on what you have been doing, what achievements you have had so far?
Sure. So I'm Sanjay. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it about 7 years. I started actually in the United States in Colorado. So that's where my journey began, 2016-ish. And then since then, yeah, like you said, I've been competing quite a bit. It's something I enjoy doing. And the past 2 years, I've been pretty much doing it full time. And yeah, achievements. Yeah, so I won the Strangle Nationals, or sorry, not National, that's coming up, but the Strangle Kolkata, that was in, yeah, so that was maybe in May of last year. So I won that one. And I placed second in ADCC India. And then there's a few other achievements here and there, and Colorado State Championship, things like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you started in Colorado. So, firstly, what brought you to, like, what took you to US, and why did you decide to start grappling there?
Yeah, so I actually went there for my undergraduate degree. Yeah, so I was doing psychology was the course that I was doing. So I started, so that's why I was in the US. That's why I was in Boulder, USA at the time. And I guess what got me into it was I remember there was this one incident. This actually happened in high school. I was a bit of a loudmouth, I guess, in high school. So I remember I was just having this like verbal altercation with this guy. He was actually on the varsity rugby team. And I remember just, saying something not very nice to him. And the next second, like I was on my butt and he was on top of me. He basically did like a double leg takedown on me. And then I remember realizing, like, wow, like at that moment, I was like, wow, my words have consequences. And at the very least, like if I am going to be, talking shit or something like that, I should at least know how to defend myself. So that's kind of what kind of got me into it. And then a few months later, I started college, and then I found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I just was kind of Googling it, and then I found it. Yeah.
So when was this? Like, at what age did you start the journey?
Yeah, so I was 18 when I started. Yeah, so that just right as soon as I was done with high school and I was going to college. Yeah.
So, and you said that you Googled. So did you find a gym nearby, or did you have to travel a lot to get the training?
It was fairly close by at the time. Yeah. So it was maybe like 10-15 minutes away from my college by bus. So like I would just pretty much take the bus every day. Yeah, to be honest, like initially I wasn't the most into jiu-jitsu. Like to be honest, I was maybe indulging in some other activities originally in college. But eventually, like once I started getting into rolling, and then the whole like fighting aspect of it, that became pretty appealing to me. And that's when I started, ramping it up a little bit more, like somewhere around like the second year of doing jiu-jitsu.
So, do you remember your first experience of setting your foot on the mat? Like, how did it feel, and what was your first class like?
Yeah. So again, like I said, originally to be honest, wasn't that into it. So I remember going there and it was like a bunch of like beginner, like self-defense techniques, which obviously, that's a good thing. That's what you want to show beginners. But I was a pretty, dumb like kid at that point. I'm still not the smartest, but I was basically like looking for like a fight gym or something. But then the way that gym operated, Easton, which is it's a great model of like when you initially get people in, like start doing the whole self-defense thing, and then eventually then they can start rolling and things like that. So it was basically like a bunch of break falls, technical stand-up. Like I don't know if you've heard of like Gracie combatives, where you get in a headlock, and then all these kind of things. So that was my first class. And I was like, I'm not really too interested in this. But then eventually, like, I was like, okay, yeah, this jiu-jitsu really works. And it's almost like having like a, special ability, so to speak.
So training and competing are two different things. So what made you compete there? Like you said that Colorado State Championship. So what made you compete there?
Yeah, so at the time, my coach, he's still my coach, but obviously he's in the US now. His name is John Combs. So he was actually a huge reason for me to start competing, because I would see him kind of in the local circuit in Colorado, as well as like on the world stage. Like he's highly ranked in the world. And to be honest, maybe if I wasn't exposed to him, maybe I wouldn't have taken up competing. I'm not sure, but I would basically see like how he was doing, and he would also be like coaching me at the same time. So I thought, it would make sense for me to also kind of try my luck at competing. And what really kind of made the shift for me to start competing more seriously was, I remember initially I would compete and have kind of very mixed results, like in those championships that I was telling you about, like Colorado State. There was like a few like grappling industries, different tournaments, like because in the US there's quite a few that happen monthly. So I remember I was doing those local tournaments, and I wasn't really having that much success, to be honest. I was getting my ass beat. Uh, but then what actually changed was, I remember having a conversation with John, and he said something to the effect of like effort over results, in the sense that the results are kind of irrelevant. It's more about the work you put in and the training, your mentality, eating right, all these things. That's eventually what goes into a successful performance, right? Instead of worrying about, oh, like I want to get first, like if you go in with that mentality, like a lot of times it might not work out. It might not, you know what I mean? But if you go in with the approach that, I just got to show up to training every day, make sure my preparation is right, then the results almost become secondary. It's like irrelevant, as long as you're putting in the effort. So once I kind of had that shift in mentality, I noticed like I actually started having better results. Like when I wasn't so focused on like some Instagram highlight reel, or something stupid like that. That wasn't my primary motivation anymore. It was more like self-development and getting good at jiu-jitsu, rather than posting some cool stuff.
So if I understand, when you wrapped up your studies, you came back to India. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. So how did you find a gym to train in India? Like when you returned, did you do some research? Research? How was the research going?
Yeah, absolutely. So even when I was doing my course in the US, I kept coming back every year or so. And my parents at the time lived in Bangalore. So I was super familiar with IJJ, right? So, Rohit, obviously, one of the best grapplers in India at the moment. So I would be training with him about once a year, twice a year. So obviously that was one option of me maybe coming back and training full time at IJJ. And then the other option I was thinking about was, it was Warrior Cove at the time. Since then, obviously, it's split into a few different factions. But I remember seeing the Leverage tournament, actually. And this was right around when I was about to move back to India. And I remember seeing like a few guys from Warrior Cove had a pretty good performance, especially with the leg locks, which was not, at the time, I wasn't very too familiar with that. So I felt like competitively, like in that specific sense of jiu-jitsu, if I wanted to take my career to like the next level, I probably had to, join that team. So that's eventually what I did, is I came, joined Warrior Cove. And then now, obviously, we've split since, I think, so it's me, Piyush, and Rajiv. So we do Rebel MMA. So that's our faction.
So how was it different training in Colorado and coming back here and training here? Like what was some of the major differences that you saw?
Yeah. So at the time in the US, I was actually doing a lot of gi jiu-jitsu, right? So I was competing a lot in the gi. But then since I came here, I think the emphasis at the time was a lot more no-gi. So for people that are not familiar with gi and no-gi, so gi is basically when you have that kimono on and you have your belt and everything, right? And then no-gi is again more like MMA style grappling, where you're just kind of in your rash guard or something like that. And so I guess, yeah, the biggest difference was I went from more of like a recreational gym to more of like a professional environment, where we were training twice a day, we were lifting. So it was like the training regimen was completely different, so that took me a few weeks to kind of get used to that level of intensity. And yeah, it was hard training, so it was a whole different thing. But I'm, super grateful for that experience, because I think that's also kind of leveled up my jiu-jitsu significantly, just training in that environment with those guys.
So you've been competing as well. So what do you think are some of the major limitations that you see in the Indian circuit, or personally, what all have you encountered when you started competing here?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've actually, had a fantastic time competing in India. So like whether that be ADCC India, Strangle, obviously fantastic, and SJIF. So these are the three main ones that I've competed at. So I've had a fantastic experience with all of them. The only thing I would say, maybe in order for us to kind of reach that world stage potentially, is we need more competitions, I would say, in India, right? So if you look at maybe countries like the US or even countries in Europe, if we want to be competitive with them, I would say, so in those countries, there's maybe in a month, like, I can't even, like, maybe 10 tournaments a month, something like that. But maybe that's an exaggeration, but somewhere around that ballpark. But in India, if you look at it, it's maybe more around like once every 4 months, right? Obviously, there's people actively changing that, whether that's, Rajiv, Piyush are doing a great job of that. Sid is doing a good job of that. Even Ashwin, Mohit, those guys are also doing, a good job of kind of building the scene with that, right? So I think that's one thing, right? And then, to be completely honest, just funding, right? If we can get more investors into the sport, into specific athletes, right? Because geographically, if you look at it, like, we're pretty far away from all the, like, if you look at the world championship, things like that most of them happen in, I think, so Sid does some that are in Dubai, right? But there's also some in the US, wherever that is. So there's a few major organizations, IBJJF, UAE, JJ, all these major organizations. But yeah, none of them in India, unfortunately. So to cover the athlete costs, nutrition, things like that, that slowly starts adding up, right? The flight costs, definitely not cheap. So if we can get maybe more sponsorship, because I genuinely believe skill-wise, I can name a handful of athletes that are, at that level, right? Or very close to that level. And maybe what they're lacking is maybe just competition experience. So if we can get these two things, more competitions in India, more, funding, then I feel we would be right up there with everyone else.
So is the finance something that you personally been struggling with, like getting the funds for your training, managing your finances, something that you have encountered?
Something that I've, sorry?
Something that you have faced as a challenge?
Yeah, so luckily, like, my parents have been extremely supportive of my journey, right? Like, I remember telling them, after my degree, I was like, yeah, I think I want to do jiu-jitsu full time. Initially they probably were thinking like, this guy's, a little bit crazy, but they were eventually like very supportive actually of my decision. And so they've always been helping me quite a bit. And, just from teaching and, just doing jiu-jitsu, winning competitions, things like that, I'm able to kind of sustain myself. But yeah, if it weren't for the support that I receive, it would be a very hard thing for me to be doing this completely full time.
So where do you see the Indian grappling scene going? Like you mentioned that lack of competition is there, funding is there. There's also talented grapplers. Like where do you see the grappling scene going from here?
Yeah. So yeah, just to kind of name a few like really super tough guys. Like, I would say Devajit from IJJ. So he's actually doing the same bracket that I'm doing this coming weekend. He's definitely one of the top grapplers. So he's maybe like, so he's right under Rohit. He trains with Rohit, full time pretty much. Nihal, he's also from IJJ. Piyush, obviously. So I do a lot of my training with Piyush, and he's basically like an encyclopedia of jiu-jitsu knowledge. So he's a fantastic grappler as well. And then Diviz from Nepal. I don't know if you know him, but he's a phenomenal grappler as well. There's also a few up and coming guys, like there's a guy from our gym, Nehansh Sharma, awesome guy, very talented MMA fighter. Right, he just won his amateur fight. Ravi Bharati from IJJ, Abhimanyu Chadda. So just to kind of name a few guys, to give them a shout out, because these are the guys that are kind of come up and coming, and will, in like 2 to 3 years, they'll probably be running things, and probably be beating my ass, Yeah. But sorry, the question was, where do I see the scene going in a few years? Yeah. So again, like I was saying, with the tournaments like Strangle, ADCC India, like, it's only getting bigger, right? Like, grappling today in India, compared to even, let's say, 5 years ago. I don't think 5 years ago there was as many competitions as there are today, as many or different organizations, right? So the more competition, the better, so to speak, right? So the more grappling promotions that come up, I think there's another one, UGC, there's different, like a lot of different tournaments, SJIF. So it kind of forces everyone else to kind of rise up to that level, right? So I feel, in 4 to 5 years, I feel we'd be able to send someone, hopefully to ADCC trials within these next few years, and maybe have someone win. So even the competition I'm doing this weekend, right? So Rajiv said that the winner of the pro division will go to trials. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I win that, and then I'll be able to represent India at the trials, right? So that's one tournament. There's also gi jiu-jitsu, right? A lot of gyms focus heavily on the gi. Like I believe Siddharth's gym mainly focuses in gi, like obviously phenomenal no-gi grapplers as well. But so those are kind of the two fronts, like maybe representation in the Asian circuit for India, right? Because we do kind of have to like start small and then kind of make our way to world championship, things like that. So how I see it is, first we can maybe start to send people to the Asian scene, do really well. And in the gi circuit, I think Siddharth's doing a great job of sending people to Abu Dhabi, competing there. And then from there, maybe take the next step to maybe the worlds in the US, something like that. So I believe like we're on the right trajectory. It'll just take more time. I think that's the only thing. And funding, like I said, yeah.
Before we close, a couple of questions. Firstly, if you could make three super fights from the Indian grappling circuit, like what could they be?
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough question. Okay. So I'm gonna start off with so Piyush has actually been having a tough time finding a super fight. He's been trying to do that for a while. But if I could match up Piyush with anyone in the Indian circuit, it would be actually Devesh from IJJ. So he's a phenomenal grappler, and they have very like similar styles, so to speak. I guess Piyush is more of like has a top game, top style pressure, things like that, more wrestling. Devesh also has a phenomenal game, so it would just be a good matchup over there, and they have some history as well. Not history, good history, obviously. Like they just used to train in the same gym. That's what I meant. No bad blood, nothing like that. So the two great guys. It'll be awesome to see that super fight. I'd like to see maybe Rohit. So I would say honestly, pound for pound, Rohit is probably like the best grappler in India, in my opinion. Like he's definitely up there, right? Especially in my weight category, I would say Rohit's the top guy. So instead of matching him up with someone from India, I would maybe want to see him against maybe someone from Australia, someone like that, like Jeremy Skinner. He just won the Asian trials. So it'd be nice to see Rohit compete against someone on that caliber. Like I would love to see that match. That'd be a very, very entertaining match, I feel. Because Rohit's kind of like an OG in the Indian scene. He's been doing this a while, very knowledgeable. So that'd be a good fight. And then last, but definitely not the least, I'd like to put myself in there. I'd want to see myself hopefully against Devojit this weekend would be I feel a great match. I feel stylistically it would be good, and he's a phenomenal competitor, really good at jiu-jitsu. So I definitely want to see how my skills match up against his. Right, it would be a pretty honest reality check one way or the other. Um, and potentially, if not Devojit, if I don't make it up to the finals or whatever semis, I'd want to rematch against Aman Hussain. Yeah, that guy talks a lot of shit. I'm not the biggest fan of him. He basically beat me once by like humping my back for like 2-3 minutes. So if he wants to do a real match, that'd be great as well. Sometime down the line, it'd be good to get a rematch with Aman.
So before we close, like for someone that want to take up grappling, like what would the advice that you would put out there?
Right. So I would kind of divvy that up into two sections, like maybe recreationally taking up grappling or professionally taking up grappling, right? So recreationally, phenomenal thing, right? So there's a lot of health benefits, right? It's personally, like for me, it's made me a lot healthier, both physically, emotionally, mentally, right? It's even made me healthier. Like I make more conscious, like health choices, because I'm like, okay, I gotta go to training the next day. Maybe don't drink 7 beers tonight, something like that. Just an example, right? It's just so generally it just helps you in many different aspects of life, not just like physical fitness. It's a very intuitive, like mental activity as well, so recreationally, it's a phenomenal thing. So if you're listening to this, definitely come train with us, Rebel MMA. If you guys are in this NCR area, or Bangalore, wherever you are, try to find a jiu-jitsu gym near you. Yeah. And professionally, I would definitely recommend it as well, right? Because it's something I've been doing the past 2 years, and I've had a phenomenal time doing it, right? The only thing I would recommend is trying to find some sort of sponsor, something like that, or maybe if you could be backed by someone, something like that, where you're getting a little bit of assistance. Because just to be completely transparent, for the first few years, just getting started off, it will be a little bit rocky. And this is, again, I want to give you a lot of credit, Ranjit, for this, because you are always highlighting the new up and coming athletes and giving them a spotlight, helping with their funding, putting it out on notice, So as you know, like you know better than most, that is kind of the main issue at the moment, right? It's just the funding. So if that barrier bridge we can cross, then wow, Indian MMA, Indian Jiu-Jitsu in general has so much to offer the world, right? And I feel, give it 2 to 5 years, something like that. And, we've already just seen how much Anshul has done, right? Anshul Jubli, and that's a huge motivation to everyone, like people like me that are trying to make this happen, whether they've just started in the game, now they have something to work towards, have someone to like look at and be like, okay, this is the step, this is how to go about doing it, right? So I think it's just a matter of time. That's all it is, because the skill is there, the coaches are there, everything is ready for Indian MMA to do great things.